The blood-red sunset cast long shadows across the dusty main street of Randsburg, California, as Clara Edwards stood on the auction block with tears streaming down her face. The year was 1876, and her life once filled with promise and dreams had crumbled to dust like the parched earth beneath her feet. She trembled as the auctioneer's voice boomed across the crowd, men's eyes crawling over her like hungry vultures. "Next up, gentlemen. A fine young woman, healthy and strong. Can cook, clean, and sew, starting bid at $50. Clara bit her lip to keep from sobbing openly. Just 3 months ago, she had been traveling west with her father to start a new life after her mother's passing. But typhoid had claimed him too, leaving her alone and penniless in this harsh frontier town. With mounting debts and no family to turn to, the bank had seized everything including her freedom, it seemed. The crowd of men jeered and called out bids, each one making Clara flinch. $50. 60, 75. The vulgar comments about what they'd do with her made her stomach turn. She'd heard about debt servitude contracts, but this felt more like slavery despite the paper she'd been forced to sign. $100, called a gruff voice from the back. 125. Countered another. Clara kept her eyes downcast, unwilling to look at the men who were bidding on her like cattle. The late summer heat pressed down, making it hard to breathe, her corseted waist constricting further with each panicked breath. $200. The deep voice cut through the crowd like a knife, silencing the others. Clara couldn't help but look up. Standing at the edge of the gathered men was a tall figure, broad-shouldered and straight-backed. His face was partially shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat, but she could see a strong jaw dusted with dark stubble. 200 going once. The auctioneer called, looking around nervously. Going twice. No one challenged the bid. The crowd parted as the stranger strode forward, spurs jingling with each step. He moved with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to being respected or feared. Sold. To Mr. Davidson Larson for $200. The auctioneer handed over the contract to the tall stranger, who barely glanced at it before tucking it inside his leather vest. Clara stood frozen as he approached, her heart hammering against her ribs. When he finally looked up at her, she was surprised to see eyes the color of a summer sky, not cold and predatory as she'd expected, but clear and steady. He offered his hand to help her down from the platform. "Miss Edwards, I presume?" Clara nodded mutely, her throat too tight for words. "Davidson Larson," he said simply. "My ranch is just outside of town. You'll be safe there." She hesitated before taking his hand, unsure what safe meant to a man who had just purchased another human being. His hand was calloused but gentle as he helped her down. "I don't." She began, her voice barely a whisper. He leaned closer, his voice low so only she could hear. "From now on, you'll only know joy, Miss Edwards. You have my word." Clara's eyes widened in surprise, searching his face for any sign of mockery or deceit, but found none. Before she could respond, he guided her toward a handsome chestnut mare tethered nearby. "Can you ride?" he asked. "Yes," she managed. "My father taught me." Something like approval flashed in his eyes. "Good. It's a fair distance to the ranch." As he helped her onto the mare, she noticed the townsfolk watching with undisguised curiosity. Some women whispered behind their hands, and men who had been bidding moments before now avoided her gaze. Davidson untied a magnificent black stallion and mounted with fluid grace. "Mr. Larson," she ventured as they rode slowly out of town, "I don't understand what you mean to do with me." He glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "My housekeeper, Mrs. Winters, is getting on in years. She needs help with the running of the house. That's all. That's all." Clara repeated skeptically. "That's all," he confirmed, then added with a hint of grimness, "I don't make a habit of buying women, Miss Edwards, but I do make a habit of stopping things that ain't right when I see them." They rode in silence for a while, the town falling away behind them. The landscape opened into rolling hills dotted with scrub brush and the occasional oak tree. In the distance, mountains rose purple against the darkening sky. "Why did you say that?" Clara finally asked. "About joy, I mean." Davidson kept his eyes on the trail ahead. "Because no person should have that look in their eyes that you had up on that platform, and because I meant it." Clara studied his profile, wondering what kind of man he truly was. In her experience, men rarely did anything without expecting something in return. "I can't repay you," she said bluntly. "Not with money. I'm not asking for repayment. Everyone wants something, Mr. Larson." He turned to look at her then, and there was something in his gaze that made her breath catch. "What I want, Miss Edwards, is to sleep at night knowing I did right by someone who needed help. Nothing more." The ranch appeared as they crested a hill, a sprawling single-story house with a wide porch, several outbuildings, and corrals where horses grazed in the fading light. Smoke curled from the chimney and lamplight glowed in the windows. "Welcome to Whispering Pines Ranch," Davidson said. As they approached, an older woman emerged from the house, wiping her hands on her apron. Her silver hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and despite her age, she moved with energy and purpose. "You're late for supper, Dav," she began, then stopped when she noticed Clara. "Oh, you didn't mention we'd have company. Mrs. Winters, this is Miss Clara Edwards. She'll be staying with us and helping around the house." Davidson dismounted and moved to help Clara down. "Miss Edwards, this is Mrs. Martha Winters, the finest cook in all of California and the woman who's kept this place running since I was knee-high to a grasshopper. Mrs. Winters looked between them with shrewd eyes. "Is that so? Well, come in then, child. You look half-starved and dead on your feet." Clara allowed herself to be led inside, where the smell of beef stew and fresh bread made her stomach growl embarrassingly. The interior was surprisingly comfortable, polished wood floors covered with colorful rugs, well-crafted furniture, and shelves lined with books. "Sit, sit," Mrs. Winters insisted, guiding her to the kitchen table. "I'll fetch you a bowl." Davidson hung his hat on a peg by the door and followed them. "Mrs. Winters, Miss Edwards will need the room at the end of the hall. Would you mind getting it ready while I explain things?" The older woman nodded, though her curious glance suggested she had many questions. Once she'd left the kitchen, Davidson sat across from Clara. "I imagine you have questions," he said. Clara nodded, her hands clutched tightly in her lap. "Why would you pay so much money just to hire a housekeeper? You could have hired someone for much less." "True," he acknowledged. "But that's not what was happening there today, was it? That wasn't a job fair." "No," she admitted quietly. "The banker, Roth, has been doing this for years, forcing people into debt, then selling contracts that amount to little more than slavery. The law looks the other way because he greases the right palms." Davidson's jaw tightened. "I've been trying to put a stop to it, but he's careful, so I'm—" "What? Part of your crusade against corruption?" Clara asked, uncertain whether to feel relieved or offended. Davidson shook his head. "You're a person who deserved better than what was happening to you. Nothing more complicated than that." Mrs. Winters returned before Clara could respond. "Room's all ready. Now eat up, both of you, before it gets cold." The stew was rich and hearty, the bread still warm. Clara hadn't realized how hungry she was until she took the first bite. She ate silently, listening as Davidson and Mrs. Winters discussed ranch business, cattle that needed moving, a fence that needed repair, supplies to order from town. When they finished eating, Mrs. Winters showed Clara to her room, a simple but comfortable space with a single bed, a dresser, and a small window overlooking the property. "There's a nightgown in the dresser that should fit you," the older woman said. "We'll see about getting you proper clothes tomorrow." "Thank you," Clara said, overcome with the sudden urge to cry. "You've both been very kind." Mrs. Winters patted her arm. "Davidson Larson is the best man I know. You're safe here." She hesitated, then added, "Though folks in town might talk, they always do, after Mrs. Winters left." Clara sat on the edge of the bed, trying to process everything that had happened. Just this morning, she'd awakened in a cell at the back of the bank, dreading what was to come. Now she was here in this strange house, with these strange people who seemed genuinely kind. She changed into the nightgown, which was soft from many washings but clean and whole. As she slipped between the sheets, she realized this was the first real bed she'd slept in since her father died. Exhaustion swept over her, but before sleep claimed her, she wondered about the cowboy who had bought her freedom, Davidson Larson. A man who promised joy to a woman with tears in her eyes. Dawn broke with golden light streaming through Clara's window. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was, then the events of the previous day came rushing back. She dressed quickly in her only dress, smoothing the wrinkles as best she could. The house was already active when she emerged. Mrs. Winters was bustling around the kitchen, and through the window, Clara could see Davidson in the yard talking with a younger man. "Good morning, dear," Mrs. Winters greeted her. "Sleep well." "Better than I have in months," Clara admitted. "Good. Davidson says you're to help me with the house, but don't you worry, I won't work you to the bone. Breakfast first, then we'll talk about duties." Clara ate quickly, eager to prove her worth. She had just finished when Davidson entered, bringing with him the scent of horses and morning air. "Miss Edwards," he nodded in greeting. "I trust you slept well." "Yes, thank you, Mr. Larson." "Davidson, please." He poured himself coffee. "I'll be working the north pasture today with Caleb. We're moving the herd to fresh grazing." Mrs. Winters handed him a plate of eggs and bacon. "Don't forget you promised to take the girl to town for proper clothes. Can't have her working in that Sunday dress." Davidson nodded. "We'll go tomorrow." "Would that suit you, Miss Edwards?" "Clara," she corrected, then added, "and yes, that would be fine, though I have no money." "Consider it an advance on your wages," he said simply. After breakfast, Mrs. Winters showed Clara around the house, explaining her duties: cooking, cleaning, laundry, and tending the kitchen garden. The work was straightforward, no different than what Clara had done in her own home before her father died. Davidson's parents built this place, Mrs. Winters explained as they worked. Fine people they were. His father died in '65, just after the war. His mother held on until 70. Davidson's been running things since he was 22. "He's not married?" Clara asked, then blushed at her own boldness. Mrs. Winters smiled knowingly. "No, there was a girl once, about 5 years back, Elizabeth Thornton. Her father owned the mercantile in Randsburg. But she chose the banker's son instead. More money, you see, though less character." Throughout the day, Clara caught glimpses of Davidson as he worked around the ranch. He moved with purpose and confidence, respected by the men who worked for him. Once, she saw him laugh at something one of the hands said, his whole face transforming, and she found herself staring longer than was proper. Evening brought everyone to the main house for supper. Besides Davidson and Mrs. Winters, there was Caleb, the young ranch hand she'd seen that morning, and an older man named Hank who apparently served as the ranch foreman. "So you're the gal boss bought at auction," Hank said bluntly as they ate. "Caused quite a stir in town, I hear." Clara stiffened, but Davidson spoke before she could. "Miss Edwards is our new housekeeper, Hank. That's all anyone needs to know." Hank nodded, accepting the rebuke. "No offense meant, miss, just saying people talk." "Let them," Davidson said firmly. "Their opinions matter less than dirt to me." After supper, while Clara helped Mrs. Winters with the dishes, the older woman said, "Don't mind Hank. He's rough around the edges but loyal as they come." "It's all right," Clara said. "I understand people will talk. I just hope it doesn't cause trouble for Mr. Larson." Mrs. Winters snorted. "Davidson's been causing his own kind of trouble in this county for years. Standing up for folks others would just as soon step on. The last man who tried to strong-arm him ended up with a broken jaw and a new appreciation for manners." Later, as twilight settled over the ranch, Clara found herself on the porch, drawn by the cooling air after a day of work. She was surprised when Davidson joined her, offering her a cup of coffee. "Thank you," she said, accepting it gratefully. They stood in companionable silence for a while, watching as stars emerged in the darkening sky. "You did well today," Davidson finally said. "Mrs. Winters says you're a hard worker." "I want to earn my keep," Clara replied, "and my freedom." He looked at her then. "You're not a prisoner here, Clara. That contract," he pulled it from his vest pocket and held it up, "means nothing to me except as proof that Roth is selling people. You're free to leave whenever you wish." Clara stared at him in astonishment. "Then why pay for me at all?" "Because if I hadn't, someone else would have, and they wouldn't be tearing this up." He ripped the contract in half, then quarters, then let the pieces flutter away on the evening breeze. Clara watched the scraps of paper disappear into the darkness, a weight lifting from her shoulders that she hadn't even realized was there. "Why would you do that?" she whispered. Davidson leaned against the porch railing, his profile strong in the fading light. "My father fought in the war. Came back changed, like most men did. He told me once that he'd seen enough of people treating other people like property to last 10 lifetimes. He fought for the Union then? Yes, but it wasn't just about slaves for him. It was about the basic dignity every person deserves. Davidson sipped his coffee. He taught me that a man's character is measured by how he treats those who can do nothing for him in return. Clara studied him, this strange man who spoke of dignity and tore up contracts worth hundreds of dollars. Most men wouldn't see it that way, she said. I'm not most men. His eyes met hers, and something passed between them, a current of understanding, perhaps, or something deeper. Clara looked away first, her cheeks warming. Well, contract or no, I still intend to work for my keep, and to repay you eventually. Davidson nodded, accepting her determination. Fair enough. They finished their coffee in silence, but it was a comfortable one. As Clara prepared for bed that night, she realized she hadn't thought about crying once all day. It wasn't joy yet, as Davidson had promised, but it was something close to peace. The journey to town the next day was surprisingly pleasant. The morning was cool, the sky a vast blue canvas overhead. Clara rode the same chestnut mare, who she learned was named Penny. Davidson rode beside her on his black stallion, Thunder. Mrs. Winters gave me a list of supplies to pick up, he said as they rode, and you'll need at least 3 everyday dresses, sturdy boots, and whatever. Other things women require. Clara couldn't help but smile at his obvious discomfort with the topic of women's undergarments. I'll be practical, I promise. Get what you need, he insisted. Quality things that will last. Randsburg looked different in daylight, less menacing than it had seemed during the auction. Still, Clara felt eyes on them as they rode down the main street and tied their horses outside the general store. Inside, the shopkeeper greeted Davidson warmly. Mr. Larson, good to see you. What can I help you with today? Morning, Thompson. Mrs. Winters sent a list. He handed over the paper, and Miss Edwards here needs some clothes. Thompson's eyes widened slightly as he recognized Clara, but he recovered quickly. Of course, my wife can help with that. She's in the back. Martha, he called. A plump, cheerful woman emerged from behind a curtain. Yes, dear. Oh, Mr. Larson, how lovely to see you, Mrs. Thompson. This is Miss Edwards. She needs a complete wardrobe. Would you mind helping her? Not at all. Come with me, dear. Clara followed the woman to a section of the store filled with fabrics, ready-made dresses, and various accessories. As Mrs. Thompson helped her select practical dresses, undergarments, and a pair of sturdy boots, she chattered continuously. You're staying out at Whispering Pines, then? Lovely place. Mr. Larson has made quite a success of it. Not that he didn't inherit a fine start, but he's expanded considerably. They say he's the wealthiest rancher in the county now, though you'd never know it to look at him. No heirs at all. Clara nodded politely, trying on a blue calico dress that fit surprisingly well. Of course, there's talk, Mrs. Thompson continued in a lower voice, about how he acquired you, but don't you mind that. Half the families in this county owe Davidson Larson some favor or another. He helped us refinance our mortgage when Roth tried to call in our loan early. He seems like a good man, Clara said cautiously. The best, Mrs. Thompson agreed emphatically. Too good to stay single, if you ask me. That Elizabeth Thornton was a fool to choose money over character, and now she's miserable with that Roth boy for all her fine dresses and jewelry. By the time they finished, Clara had 3 everyday dresses, 1 nicer dress for Sundays, appropriate undergarments, boots, a shawl, and a practical bonnet. Davidson added work gloves and a warm coat without asking, insisting winter would come before she knew it. As they left the store, packages in hand, a fashionably dressed woman on the boardwalk opposite stopped dead in her tracks, staring at them. Her face was pretty but pinched, her blonde hair arranged in an elaborate style beneath an expensive hat. Davidson nodded stiffly. Mrs. Roth. The woman's lips thinned. Mr. Larson. Her eyes slid to Clara with undisguised contempt. I see your purchase is settling in nicely. Clara felt herself flush with humiliation, but Davidson's expression remained impassive. Miss Edwards is my housekeeper, Elizabeth. Nothing more, nothing less. Is that what they're calling it these days? Elizabeth Roth said with a brittle laugh. Well, I suppose even the high and mighty Davidson Larson gets lonely out there on that big ranch. Davidson's jaw tightened. Give my regards to your husband. I hear his business practices are drawing attention all the way to Sacramento these days. The color drained from Elizabeth's face. Thomas has done nothing wrong. Then he has nothing to worry about, Davidson replied smoothly. Good day, Mrs. Roth. He placed a gentle hand at the small of Clara's back, guiding her toward their horses. She could feel Elizabeth's glare burning into her back as they walked away. I'm sorry about that, Davidson said quietly once they were out of earshot. Was that the Elizabeth you almost married? Clara asked. Davidson looked surprised. Mrs. Winters has been telling tales, I see. She mentioned it in passing, Clara admitted. He sighed as he helped her mount. Yes, that was Elizabeth. We were engaged briefly. She decided Thomas Roth Jr. could give her the life she wanted. Fine houses, trips to San Francisco, the latest fashions. And you couldn't, Davidson mounted his own horse before answering. I could have, but I wouldn't. My money goes back into the land and the people who work it. Elizabeth wanted to show off wealth, not build something lasting with it. They had just turned toward home when a man's voice called out, Larson, a word. Davidson tensed visibly. Approaching them was a portly man with a florid face, dressed in an expensive suit despite the heat. Beside him walked a younger version of himself, same round face, same cold eyes. Roth, Davidson acknowledged, his voice cool. And Thomas Jr., what can I do for you gentlemen? The older man's smile didn't reach his eyes. I understand you purchased a debt contract yesterday. Miss Edwards here. He nodded at Clara with a predatory smile. I'd like to buy it back. Double what you paid. Not interested, Davidson said flatly. Come now, be reasonable, Roth pressed. $400 is a handsome profit for one day's investment. Miss Edwards isn't an investment, Davidson replied, his voice hardening. And she's not for sale. Thomas Roth Jr. stepped forward, his gaze traveling over Clara in a way that made her skin crawl. Father, perhaps Mr. Larson has grown, attached, to his purchase. Can't say I blame him. Davidson's hand moved to rest on his hip, close to the revolver Clara hadn't noticed before. Choose your next words carefully, boy. The younger Roth smirked but fell silent. His father laid a restraining hand on his arm. No need for unpleasantness, the elder Roth said smoothly. But do consider my offer, Larson. Everyone has a price. He tipped his hat to Clara. Miss Edwards. As the two men walked away, Clara released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Why would they want to buy my contract back? Davidson's expression was grim. Because I tore it up and they know it. They're trying to get you back under their control. But why? I'm nobody important. It's not about you specifically, he explained as they rode out of town. It's about control. If word gets out that I interfered with one of their contracts, others might resist. They can't allow that. Clara digested this. So I've put you in danger. I was already in Roth's sights, Davidson assured her. I've been buying up notes and debts from people he's tried to ruin for years. This is just one more battle in an ongoing war. As they rode home, Clara found herself studying Davidson's profile, seeing him in a new light. He wasn't just a good man who had helped her on impulse, he was actively fighting against corruption, at considerable risk to himself. Why do you do it? She asked. Fight Roth, I mean, it can't be easy. Davidson was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. Finally, he said, My mother used to say that evil triumphs when good men do nothing. I'm not sure I'm what she'd call a good man, but I try to live by her words. I think you are, Clara said softly. A good man, I mean. He glanced at her, the ghost of a smile touching his lips. Let's get you home before Mrs. Winters sends out a search party. Home. The word settled in Clara's chest with unexpected warmth. For the first time since her father's death, she felt like she might have found a place where she belonged. The next few weeks settled into a rhythm. Clara worked alongside Mrs. Winters, learning the rhythms of the ranch house. She discovered she had a knack for baking, which delighted the ranch hands. Each day brought new skills: how to properly preserve vegetables from the garden, how to manage the household accounts, how to predict the weather from the way the cattle behaved. She saw Davidson daily, usually at meals and in the evenings when he would sometimes join her on the porch. Their conversations grew easier, ranging from books they had both read to childhood memories to dreams for the future. Clara found herself looking forward to these quiet moments when his deep voice would wash over her like a balm. One evening in early October, Clara was hanging laundry when she heard shouting from the corral. She rushed over to find Caleb trying to calm a frantic horse while Davidson lay motionless on the ground. "He's hurt bad," Hank said grimly as she approached. Horse threw him against the fence post. Clara knelt beside Davidson, her heart in her throat. Blood trickled from a cut on his temple and his breathing was shallow. "Get him to the house," she ordered, surprising herself with her own authority. "Caleb, ride for the doctor in town." The men carried Davidson to his bedroom, a space Clara had never entered before. It was simply furnished but comfortable, with a large bed, a desk covered in papers, and bookshelves lining one wall. "The doctor might not come," Hank warned as they laid Davidson on the bed. "Roth has most folks in town scared to help the boss." "Then I'll tend to him myself," Clara said, already rolling up her sleeves. "My mother was a healer. I know something of wounds and fevers." Mrs. Winters appeared with hot water and clean cloths. Together, they stripped Davidson of his shirt to check for other injuries. Clara tried to remain clinical as she examined his torso, but she couldn't help noticing the hard planes of muscle, the scattering of dark hair, and the various scars that told of a life lived hard. "3 broken ribs, I think," she said, fingers gently probing. "And the head wound is concerning." For 3 days, Davidson drifted in and out of consciousness. Clara barely left his side, bathing his fevered brow with cool cloths, spooning broth between his lips when he was lucid enough to swallow, and reading aloud from his books during the long night hours. On the 3rd night, as she dozed in a chair beside his bed, his voice startled her awake. "You're still here," he murmured, his blue eyes clear for the first time in days. Clara moved to sit on the edge of the bed, pressing a hand to his forehead. The fever had broken. "Where else would I be? You could have run," he said, his voice weak but steady. "Taken a horse and gone." "Is that what you thought I'd do? Leave you to die?" She couldn't keep the hurt from her voice. Davidson attempted to sit up, wincing in pain. Clara gently pressed him back down. "No," he admitted, "but it would have been your right." "I'm where I want to be," Clara said simply. Something shifted in his gaze, a warmth that hadn't been there before. His hand found hers on the blanket, fingers intertwining. "Thank you," he whispered, "for staying." The moment stretched between them, fragile and new. Clara was acutely aware of the rough warmth of his palm against hers, the steady rhythm of his breathing, the way his eyes never left her face. "You should rest," she finally said, reluctantly withdrawing her hand. "Mrs. Winters will have my hide if I let you exhaust yourself." A faint smile touched his lips. "Can't have that." As October yielded to November, Davidson recovered slowly. Clara continued to help care for him, even as she maintained her other duties. She found herself looking forward to their time together, reading to him, helping him take short walks as his strength returned, sharing meals when he was finally able to join the household at the table again. One crisp morning, Clara was gathering the last of the garden vegetables when Davidson appeared, walking without the cane he'd been using. "You shouldn't be out here," she chided. "It's too cold for someone still recovering." "I've been cooped up too long," he replied, sitting on a nearby bench. "Besides, I wanted to talk to you." Clara set down her basket, brushing soil from her hands. "About what?" "About your future." Davidson looked unusually serious. "You've more than repaid any debt you might have imagined you owed me. You're free to go whenever you wish, with my blessing and enough money to start fresh wherever you choose." Clara felt as though the ground had dropped away beneath her feet. "You're asking me to leave?" "No," he said quickly. "God, no, I'm saying you can leave if that's what you want." "You deserve choices, Clara. Real ones, not forced by circumstance." She studied him, this man who had saved her from auction and then saved her again by giving her true freedom, the freedom to choose. "And if I choose to stay?" she asked softly, something like hope flickered in his eyes. "Then I'd be the happiest man in California." Clara moved to sit beside him on the bench. "I have nowhere else I'd rather be." Davidson's hand found hers, tentative at first, then more confident when she didn't pull away. "Mrs. Winters says you've been running this place better than she ever did, even while nursing me back to health." "She exaggerates," Clara demurred. "She doesn't," he insisted. "This place has never felt more like a home than it has since you arrived." They sat in companionable silence, watching as a pair of red-tailed hawks circled overhead. "When I first saw you on that auction block," Davidson said after a while, "I couldn't stand the thought of anyone breaking your spirit. You looked so defiant even through your tears." "Like you might bend but never break," Clara squeezed his hand. "I was terrified, but brave," he countered. "You're the bravest person I know, Clara Edwards." The winter of 1876 was unusually harsh, with heavy snowfall isolating Whispering Pines Ranch for weeks at a time. The household drew closer together, playing cards in the evenings, telling stories around the fire, making plans for spring planting. Christmas brought unexpected joy. Despite the isolation, Mrs. Winters managed a feast that rivaled any Clara had known. Davidson presented her with a gift, a beautiful leather-bound journal and a fountain pen. "For your thoughts," he said, suddenly shy. "You mentioned once that you used to keep a journal before. Everything." Clara was touched by his thoughtfulness. She had indeed told him that, in one of their many evening conversations, but hadn't expected him to remember such a small detail. Her gift to him was more practical, a hand-knitted scarf in deep blue that matched his eyes. "It's not much," she apologized as he unwrapped it. "It's perfect," he insisted, immediately wrapping it around his neck despite the warmth of the house. "No one's made me anything by hand since my mother died." That night, after everyone else had gone to bed, Clara found Davidson standing on the porch, staring up at the star-filled sky. Snow blanketed the land, reflecting the moonlight so brightly it was almost like day. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked, joining him. "Just thinking," he replied, his breath frosting in the cold air. He was still wearing her scarf. "About what?" He turned to look at her, his expression serious. "About how different this Christmas is from last year. About how empty this house felt before you came." Clara's heart quickened. "Davidson." "I know it's too soon," he said hurriedly. "You've only been here a few months, but I need you to know that I'm falling in love with you, Clara Edwards. I think I started falling the moment I saw you on that auction block, defiant even in your tears." The confession hung in the air between them. Clara felt as though she couldn't breathe, caught between joy and fear. "You don't have to say anything," Davidson continued when she remained silent. "I don't expect anything, I just wanted you to know." Clara found her voice at last. "It's not too soon," she whispered. "Not when every day with you feels like coming home." Davidson's eyes widened. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he raised a hand to her cheek. His touch was gentle, reverent. "May I kiss you?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. In answer, Clara rose on her tiptoes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was tentative at first, then deepened as Davidson's arms circled her waist, drawing her closer. The winter night faded away, leaving only the warmth between them, the rightness of being in each other's arms. When they finally parted, Davidson rested his forehead against hers, his breathing uneven. "I never dared hope you might feel the same." "How could I not?" Clara asked simply. "You saved me in every way a person can be saved." As winter reluctantly gave way to spring, Clara and Davidson's relationship blossomed alongside the wildflowers dotting the hills. They were discreet, mindful of propriety, but Mrs. Winters noticed the change immediately and made no attempt to hide her approval. "About time," she declared when she caught them holding hands in the kitchen one morning. "I was beginning to think you two would dance around each other forever." The ranch hands were less obvious, but no less supportive. Hank took to clearing his throat loudly before entering any room where Clara and Davidson might be alone, while Caleb suddenly developed a keen interest in giving them privacy whenever possible. In late March, Davidson announced he needed to make a trip to Sacramento on business. "I'll be gone a week, maybe two," he told Clara as they walked along the creek that ran through the property. The water was high with snowmelt, gurgling merrily over rocks and fallen branches. "Hank will oversee things here." "What kind of business?" Clara asked, trying not to show her disappointment at the prospect of his absence. Davidson hesitated. "Legal matters, mostly, and I need to speak with some people about Roth." "Is it dangerous?" She couldn't keep the worry from her voice. "No," he assured her, taking her hand. "Just tedious. Meetings with lawyers and bankers." Before he left, Davidson kissed her thoroughly, as if trying to store up the memory to last through their separation. "I'll come back to you as soon as I can," he promised. The days without him dragged. Clara threw herself into spring cleaning and garden planting to keep busy, but still found herself watching the road each evening, hoping to see a familiar figure on a black stallion. It was 10 days before Davidson returned, riding in just as dusk was falling. Clara rushed out to meet him, propriety forgotten in her joy. "You're back," she breathed as he swung down from the saddle. "I told you I would be," he said, gathering her in his arms. "God, I missed you." Later, after supper, Davidson asked Clara to walk with him. The evening was mild, stars just beginning to appear in the darkening sky. "I have something to ask you," he said as they reached a flowering apple tree on a small rise overlooking the ranch buildings. Clara's heart skipped a beat. "What is it?" Davidson took both her hands in his. "When I was in Sacramento, I wasn't just handling legal matters. I was securing our future if you want it." "What do you mean?" He drew a deep breath. "Roth is finished. The State Banking Commission has revoked his charter after an investigation into his practices. It turns out I wasn't the only one collecting evidence against him." Clara gasped. "That's wonderful news, but what does it have to do with our future?" "Everything," Davidson said fervently. "It means you're truly free. No one can ever threaten you with that contract again, even though I destroyed it. It means we can build a life without looking over our shoulders." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. Clara's breath caught as he opened it to reveal a delicate gold ring set with a single pearl surrounded by tiny diamonds. "Clara Edwards," Davidson said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "When I saw you on that auction block, I promised you would only know joy from that day forward. I want to spend the rest of my life keeping that promise. Will you marry me?" Tears filled Clara's eyes, but they were tears of happiness, not sorrow like the ones she'd shed on the day they met. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Davidson Larson, I will marry you." He slid the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into a kiss that seemed to contain all the love and promise of their future together. Spring melted into summer, and preparations for the wedding consumed the ranch. Davidson insisted on a proper ceremony, not the hasty affair Clara would have been content with. "You deserve the wedding of your dreams," he told her when she protested the expense and fuss. "I just want to be your wife," she replied. "The rest is details." "Nevertheless, Mrs. Winters threw herself into planning with enthusiasm, ordering fabric for a proper wedding dress, planning a feast, and sending invitations to friends and neighbors throughout the county. On a perfect July morning in 1877, Clara stood in her room, staring at her reflection in the mirror. The woman who looked back at her bore little resemblance to the terrified girl who had stood on an auction block less than a year ago. Her dress was simple but elegant, ivory silk that Mrs. Winters had helped her sew. Her hair was arranged in soft curls, adorned with wildflowers picked that morning. A knock at the door preceded Mrs. Winters, who entered with misty eyes. "Oh, my dear, you look beautiful. Do you think he'll be pleased?" Clara asked, suddenly nervous. Mrs. Winters laughed. "That man would think you hung the moon if you showed up in a potato sack." "But yes, he'll be more than pleased." The ceremony was held under the apple tree where Davidson had proposed. Friends and neighbors filled the chairs set up on the lawn, while ranch hands stood respectfully to the side, cleaned up and uncomfortable in their Sunday best. As Clara walked toward her future husband, she saw in his face everything she had ever hoped for: love, respect, and the promise of joy for all their days to come. The minister's words washed over her, but Clara barely heard them. All she could focus on was Davidson's hand holding hers, his blue eyes never leaving her face, the love radiating from him like heat from a fire. "I, Davidson Larson, take thee, Clara Edwards, to be my lawfully wedded wife," he said, his deep voice steady and sure. "I promise to love, honor, and cherish you all the days of my life. When I first saw you, I promised you would only know joy. Today, I renew that promise before God and these witnesses. Every sunrise we share will be better than the last. Every moment together a blessing I will never take for granted." Clara's voice trembled slightly as she repeated her own vows, adding, "You saved me when I had lost all hope. You gave me back my freedom and my dignity. But more than that, you gave me your heart, and in doing so, showed me the true meaning of love. I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of that gift." You already are, Davidson whispered, his words meant for her alone. As they sealed their vows with a kiss, cheers erupted from the assembled guests. Clara laughed against Davidson's lips, overwhelmed with happiness. The celebration lasted well into the night, with dancing and feasting under lantern light. Even Thomas Roth Jr. and his wife Elizabeth made an appearance, their circumstances much reduced since his father's disgrace. Elizabeth's eyes widened at the sight of Clara in her bridal finery, arm in arm with the man she had once rejected. "Mrs. Roth," Clara greeted her pleasantly. "How kind of you to come." Elizabeth's smile was strained. "It seems congratulations are in order. You've done well for yourself." "I've found happiness," Clara corrected gently, "which is worth more than doing well." As the couple moved away, Davidson squeezed her hand. "You're a better person than I am." "I'm not sure I could have been so gracious," Clara smiled up at him. "Today is too perfect to waste even a moment on old hurts." Their wedding night was everything Clara had dreamed and more. Davidson was gentle and passionate by turns, his hands and lips mapping her body with reverent attention. In his arms, she discovered new dimensions of pleasure and intimacy, their bodies learning each other's rhythms until they moved as one. Afterward, lying in the circle of his arms, Clara traced idle patterns on his chest. "Do you remember the first thing you ever said to me?" "That day on the auction block," Davidson kissed her forehead. "That from now on you would only know joy." "You kept your promise," she murmured, sleepy and content. "And I always will," he vowed, drawing her closer. As the years passed, Whispering Pines Ranch prospered under their joint care. Davidson's business acumen, combined with Clara's practical management, turned it into one of the most successful operations in California. They expanded, buying neighboring properties when they came available, always treating their workers fairly and generously. In the spring of 1878, Clara discovered she was expecting their first child. Davidson's joy knew no bounds. He followed her around the ranch, insisting she rest frequently and eat well, until she finally banished him to the north pasture with the cattle. "I'm having a baby, not an illness," she told him, laughing. "Women have been doing this since Eve." Their son, James Daniel Larson, arrived on a stormy December night, with Mrs. Winters acting as midwife. He had his father's blue eyes and his mother's determined chin. "He's perfect," Davidson whispered, cradling his son with hands that suddenly seemed too large and rough for such a delicate task. Clara watched them, her heart so full it felt it might burst. "He is," she agreed, "like his father." 2 years later, they welcomed a daughter, Sarah Elizabeth Larson, a sweet-natured child with her mother's auburn hair and her father's gentle heart. Life wasn't without challenges. In 1883, drought threatened the ranch, forcing difficult decisions about which fields to irrigate and which cattle to sell. In 1885, Mrs. Winters passed peacefully in her sleep, leaving a hole in their household that could never quite be filled. But through it all, Davidson and Clara faced each day together, their love deepening with shared joys and sorrows. On the 10th anniversary of the day they met, Davidson surprised Clara with a special dinner after the children were asleep. 10 years, he marveled, raising his glass to her. "Sometimes I still can't believe my luck that you chose to stay with me." "It wasn't luck," Clara said, taking his hand across the table. "It was destiny." Later, as they sat on the porch swing watching the stars, a tradition they had maintained through the years, Davidson presented her with a small velvet box. Inside was a delicate gold locket. When Clara opened it, she found a tiny scrap of paper carefully preserved under glass. "Is this?" She began, recognizing the faded ink. "A piece of your contract," Davidson confirmed. "The only piece I kept, to remind me of how close I came to never finding you." Clara closed her fingers around the locket, deeply moved. "I never thought I'd be grateful for being put on that auction block, but I am. It led me to you." "To us," Davidson corrected, drawing her into his embrace. As the years continued to pass, Whispering Pines Ranch became known not just for its prosperity but for its hospitality. Davidson and Clara opened their home to those in need: widows, orphans, and anyone who needed a fresh start. They established a school on their property for their own children and those of their workers, hiring a teacher from San Francisco who was progressive enough to teach both boys and girls equally. James grew into a thoughtful young man with his father's head for business and his mother's compassion. Sarah became a skilled horsewoman and amateur botanist, cataloging the native plants of the region with scientific precision. In 1896, 20 years after they first met, Clara and Davidson sat on their porch, watching their grandchildren play in the yard. James had married the daughter of a neighboring rancher and had 2 sons of his own. Sarah was engaged to a young doctor who had recently set up practice in Randsburg. "Did you ever imagine this?" Clara asked, her hand still fitting perfectly in Davidson's after all these years. Time had etched lines around their eyes and silver threads through their hair, but the love between them remained unchanged. "Not all of it," Davidson admitted. "I hoped we'd have children, maybe even grandchildren someday, but I never imagined how full my heart would feel watching our family grow." Clara rested her head on his shoulder, content in the life they had built together. "That day on the auction block when you said I would only know joy, I thought it was just words. I didn't believe joy was possible anymore." "And now?" Davidson asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. Clara smiled, watching as their oldest grandson carefully helped his younger brother climb the apple tree, the same tree under which she and Davidson had exchanged their vows so many years ago. "Now I know that joy isn't the absence of sorrow or hardship," she said thoughtfully. "It's facing them together with love. It's building something that matters, something that will outlast us. Like this ranch," Davidson said. "Like our family. Like the love between us," Clara added, turning to look into the blue eyes that had captivated her from the start. "That's the greatest joy of all." As the sun set over Whispering Pines Ranch, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Davidson and Clara Larson held each other close, grateful for the twist of fate that had brought them together and the love that had transformed a moment of despair into a lifetime of joy. The woman who had once stood on an auction block with tears in her eyes had indeed found the joy a cowboy had promised her, not just for a moment or a season, but for all the days of her life.